Welcome to the complete animation of Kitty Softpaws from DreamWorks Animation's 2011 animated feature, Puss in Boots. I don't know where this movie got its terrible reputation from, because basically all of the quote-unquote movie critics who ever talk about Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, they always say things along the lines of, "This is a sequel to an animated spin-off that nobody ever asked for and everybody forgot about." It's like, what? This movie is good. This is a really good movie. I really enjoy this movie. And I don't know where people get off saying that this movie is forgettable or that this movie is somehow subpar. Now, this movie does have problems. I'll get to that. This movie isn't perfect. Yes, The Last Wish is a much, much, much better movie, but it's not like that makes this movie bad. So first off, let's just go through the ranking of everything in the Shrek universe. Obviously, the best movie is Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. The Last Wish is not only the best movie in the entire, Shrek fairy tale turned upside down world, it's one of the best movies that DreamWorks has ever made. The Last Wish is so good, and I'll never run out of good things to say about it. Then there is Shrek, the original one, the first one. The first one is really the only genuinely really good Shrek movie. Then there is Puss in Boots, this one. This movie right here. It is the third best movie in that entire series, franchise. And then the ranking gets really weird because I actually think that Shrek the Third is the next best movie. I watched it, and after I watched it for the first time last year, I started hearing noticing maybe all these people who say that Shrek the Third is so bad. I'm like, what? Where are you getting that from? Shrek the Third was actually pretty good. I enjoyed it. Then the next movie in the ranking is Shrek Forever After. It tried to do the whole, time travel or alternate universe thing where you gotta fix things back to the way they were to begin with. But I think it did all right. It was just an okay movie. And then at the very bottom of the barrel is Shrek 2, which many people are surprised to hear that that's my opinion because everybody's like, oh, Shrek 2 is the best, and I honestly don't see it. I think that Shrek 2 was far and away the worst movie of the entire series. But that does get to the criticism, basically the one thing that I dislike about Puss in Boots. And that's Humpty Dumpty. I think that Humpty Dumpty is the thing that drags down this movie. I think that his entire character is a flawed inclusion from the start. I think that they should have done anything else besides Humpty Dumpty as being a major character. I think that this Humpty Dumpty never should have been anything more than a slight appearance, kind of like all of the other fairy tales in the first Shrek movie. Humpty Dumpty should have been like Pinocchio or the Three Little Pigs, the way that they showed up in the first Shrek movie, where it's like they're there, they have a few lines just to show off who they are, but never end up being major characters. Especially the way that they ended up being major characters in the later movies. because I just do not like this Humpty Dumpty. His face is weird. His like he I just don't like him. But the weird thing is I feel like they made the best version of him that they could have. It's like, here's Humpty Dumpty, and here's what he looks like. Now let's make it as good as we can. And they did. But the only problem is making something that is fundamentally unappealing and flawed like this Humpty Dumpty and making it a high quality best version of it. It's still a fundamentally flawed part of the movie. Like, literally every other part of this movie I really enjoy. I really enjoy seeing Puss in Boots, you know, as a child growing up in the small town. Except for the Humpty Dumpty part of it. I genuinely enjoy Puss and Kitty's relationship and the whole will they, won't they sort of romantic tension they have. Really enjoy that. I really enjoy the chase for the magic beans from Jack and Jill. I really like so much about this movie. I especially love just the vibes that this movie has. One of the biggest things that I like about Puss in Boots is its very sort of unique blend of so many things to make its part of its fantasy world. Because it's just such an amazing mix of sort of like traditional European sensibilities with small European towns and, you know, paved streets that are all walkable, and sort of a mix with almost a Western vibe with, you know, desert landscapes. And it's like there's a different kind of Western. There's the Western that is, you know, cowboys and stuff, but then there's also the Western that is, you know, a little bit more, has more Spanish in it. It's really hard to describe, but I really like just the vibes and the world that are going on here in Puss in Boots. And I like basically every character in the movie, except for Humpty Dumpty. And I don't know why nobody else seems to share this opinion with me. It's like basically every other quote-unquote movie critic. I so dislike movie critics. I dislike them so much. They all seem to be in agreement that this movie is forgettable. This is the spin-off that nobody asked for, and who would have thought that a sequel to this movie would have been one of the greatest animated features of all time? And I really am just so confused how they're all able to have that opinion when this movie genuinely has some really awesome parts to it. Though, one of the things that I've noticed in this movie is how different the marketing material is from the movie itself, specifically with Puss in Boots' outfit. Because you look at the trailers, not the trailers, the posters, they often show Puss wearing a cape. And at the very beginning of the movie, it shows Puss wearing a cape. But then the rest of the movie, he doesn't. It's just the hat and feather and boots and sword. And I have a theory. I think that this movie originally intended for Puss to have a cape. And the very beginning scene where it shows him, you know, leaving another cat after a romantic evening together, I think that what happened is that was sort of a pilot animation bit or a test animation bit that they ended up just keeping in the movie. And they built a ton of promotional material using the imagery there, but they decided that they didn't want the cape in the movie itself. My guess is because they didn't feel like they could properly animate that cape. Just this big floppy piece of cloth hanging behind the main character the entire time. And I have absolutely zero evidence to support that theory, but it's what I want to go with, and I think that it's plausible, and it makes the fact that he does have his cape in the sequel all the better, probably because they were more confident in their simulation abilities at the time. I really like the way that this movie looks a bunch of the time. I think that its visuals are right up there with the best that you could expect anything to have back in 2011. And I'm still just completely flabbergasted that basically everybody else in the world seems to say that this movie is no good. I really don't know. Have they even seen this movie? Have they seen it since then? Because I get the feeling that everybody who said that, they saw this movie way back when and never watched it again. And I like how well this movie, its story, hints at such a bigger, more broad world. Because it takes advantage of the fact that these are all fairy tales that people already know. People already know about Jack and the Beanstalk. And this movie is able to take that, previous knowledge and use it to its advantage. Where it's like, oh yeah, the giant is already dead. But instead we have, what remains after the giant. And I think that is much more interesting than just actually doing the giant. Although that reminds me of the canceled Disney animated feature that would tell, the Jack and the Beanstalk story. It was going to be titled Gigantic, as part of, the Disney modern trend of reducing, their classic stories down to one word. And I don't know why that movie was canceled. I wish it wasn't, because holy cow, there are so many movies that have come out since where it's like, really, Disney? You canceled Gigantic, whatever that was, in order to put out things like Ralph Breaks the Internet or Strange World? Movies that, while not entirely without merit, also don't really measure up to the quality that you have. And so, because we never got Gigantic from Disney, we'll have to settle for this section in Puss in Boots, which is a good section. Except for the fact that they have Humpty Dumpty with them the entire time. Humpty Dumpty just isn't a very good character in this movie. It's like Humpty Dumpty is the only thing I dislike in this movie. Basically everything else in this movie I really, really enjoy. I just wish that Humpty Dumpty wasn't in this movie. But, even in spite of Humpty Dumpty being in this movie and dragging it down, I still think it's a really good movie. The interesting thing about Disney's Gigantic is that the canceled project is now forever immortalized in a movie that's already out, namely Zootopia, because during the part in Zootopia where Duke Weaselton is selling bootleg movies, he has a DVD with the cover Giraffic, which is, a play off of the then in development Gigantic movie. But Gigantic never came out, and so now Giraffic is a relic of a bygone what could have been. And honestly, I think that it should have been. I think that they should have just said, okay, whatever this movie is, we're making it. They said it probably wasn't working. I think they should have just made it, and it would have been better than some of the things that Disney has done since then. One of the things I really like about this movie is the music. I really like its, Spanish-infused instruments and soundtrack. It goes a long way to giving this movie its own auditory identity. And I really like way that a bunch of the scenes are lit. Like the lighting here during this campfire dance scene, I think is really appealing. Where they're able to have a nice, soft light that shines over a dark background. I enjoy it. And I think that this movie does a really good job with its character animation, especially with how sort of transformative the characters can be. Because they often have the cats walking around on two legs, but then they can also have them transition into, actual cat mode and run around on four legs and act like cats there. I think it's fun. And that's just one of the things that I like in animated features. It's when they want to have fun. They want to be playful and make sure that the things that you're seeing on the screen are interesting and things that you would enjoy watching again just because of how well executed it is. One of the things I really like about the design of these characters is how much they lean in to all of the features that cats really have. Especially their whiskers. Because you look at movies like The Lion King, the female characters there, like Nala and Sarabi, they aren't rendered, for lack of a better word, with whiskers. But here, in Puss in Boots, Kitty, she is a very feminine cat, but she has these massive whiskers, and not only that, she also has, those whisker-like eyebrows. It's really nice that they felt confident enough to do that. Because a lesser character designer would probably have just made her into, gotten rid of the whiskers just to accentuate, her femininity. Femininity. I think that's the way you pronounce that. And yeah, this movie is so good. You can even see the dust motes in the air there in the dungeon scene. It's just so good. And I think that this movie is basically the definition of underrated. It's not a perfect movie, but it is a movie that is worth watching and has so many things going for it. I really think that the reputation that it has is not earned. And if you haven't seen this movie before, I cannot recommend it enough. It is good. Yes, The Last Wish is better. So much better. The Last Wish is an all-time masterpiece, but this movie is still really good, and I wish more people would watch it and appreciate it for the things that it does. Thanks for watching.